Okay, cool. Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another 113 release team meeting. So the usual disclaimer, we are being recorded right now. So please be mindful of what you say. And for those who just joined, I've pinged the link to the release doc, not the release doc, the meeting minutes in the chat. Please add your name if you've not done so already. Cool. Let's get started. Announcements. I was just reading the issue Aaron opened regarding GitHub incident that's affecting Prow labels this morning. Aaron, is there anything that we should watch out for? I know you are filing all the PRs there in the issue.
So I'm trying not to track everything. It's basically, this is an issue for us to help track places where Prow may not necessarily be resilient. GitHub turned off delivery of webhooks, which means that Prow won't react to webhooks. And I think they just, in the last 15 minutes, started playing back old webhooks, I think. So we're keeping an eye on how Prow and Tide react to webhooks from the past. And if there are any issues, we'll keep that issue updated. But like for those of you whose duties involve going around GitHub and making sure everything looks about right, if you see something weird, please say something and tie it back to that issue. So because we'd like to make sure that Prow and Tide and all of our automation are resilient to outages like this. And so it's a good time for us to just collect and document all of the things that happened around this time.
Yeah, and this will affect more than just labels. It'll affect pretty much all the Prow automation. And it's pretty likely that there could be some unexpected stuff if they're actually playing webhooks back from all the way since yesterday. Given that not a lot has happened last night, it probably won't affect too many PRs, though, hopefully.
Okay. So it started sometime yesterday night?
Yeah, based on GitHub's logs, it started yesterday evening.
Okay. I will put a note there so that we can wrangle stuff in. Okay. Moving on. As for announcements, first of all, thanks a lot for folks for being flexible and for attending the meeting at 10 a.m. today. I got at least multiple folks pinging me saying the 11 a.m. time slot didn't work. So we moved it back to 10 a.m. Hopefully this works. And as for announcements, if you have not heard this already, we had our alpha cut last week. We did have a few issues, but we worked past that. We have an alpha 2 slated for actually Wednesday. We had this changed due to the availability of the shadows and the lead. And Hannes, our branch manager, would be cutting the alpha 2 this time. So that gives us a good chance to see how it works for the shadow as well. Hopefully we have most of the credentials that we need worked out in GCP. I was watching the release retro, the 112 retro, and as one of the action items, Aaron, you were talking about maintaining a release log to keep track of how we do certain things and how historically we've been doing that. So I've taken an action item to start putting out whatever I'm doing for this release in a doc. I will share it out maybe in a day or two and pull in more folks to add historical context where applicable, and then we'll see where it makes sense to put this log. Should it go to individual handbooks or should it go to the release lead handbook? But I will get started and try to put as much info as I can as we proceed along. And as for dates, we have the enhancement freeze coming up tomorrow. So that's our first milestone that we are hitting for this release. With that, I'll turn to Kendrick to talk about enhancements.
Yeah, so that is first milestone to hit. So we do have 37 issues we are currently having in the spreadsheet right now. 25 I feel very confident about. 12 I put as at risk. I'm going to be working with the shadows a little bit this afternoon to go and ping all these at-risk ones again. The only reason they're at risk is because, of course, Aish and Aaron have gone through most of these particular issues and asked to have some sort of KK tracking mechanism built in, so we have some sort of tag to the PRs that are going in. And so they're either at risk because there's been zero communication or there is no PR. And if I had to guess at the end of tomorrow, if there's still no communication or any sort of tag PR, probably is going to get bumped, if I had to guess. And I think I'll probably talk to Aisha around that about which ones that we should just go ahead and we will be the ones that sort of take that out and not let it be deferred from the feature owner itself.
Yep.
So that's currently what's happening there. Yeah, so
Cool.
that's what we'll be doing this afternoon.
Yeah, for what I was worth, we tried to, Aaron, Kendrick, and I tried to ping the different issues last week. And the main idea behind this was to keep an open channel with the feature owners so that we can assess enhancements that are at risk earlier in the game. So few feature owners like came ahead and like punted a few of the features to 1.14, which was a good thing. But we'll continue to do that more of this week. And along those lines, Aaron was kind enough to take this list to SIG-ARC for their review. Aaron, do you want to give an update on that?
Nothing super major. Like I said, pretty much people kicked out things ahead of time. There was nothing that SIG architecture felt like needed to be kicked out now. So the way I did this was as a human being, I added an extra column to the feature spreadsheet called like Aaron clusters, XP cluster something, ignoring the SIGs and all that stuff, just to try and decompose it into, if I had to describe the Kubernetes feature to a group of people in like 30 seconds to a minute, what would I tell them? So that's just what that column was about. Maybe it'll help us come release time. Server-side apply is a major change that's been going on in a feature branch for a while. Mm-hmm. They're not sure if they will make it to alpha, but the idea is if they don't make it, they stay in their feature branch, and that's totally fine. If they do make it, we'll have a better idea of the feasibility of that prior to code freeze. Sounds good to me. Another thing was there's a lot of storage work. It might be interpreted as though Kubernetes CSI is going to GA. That is not the case. It sounds more like the CSI spec, independent of the Kubernetes project, I think, is going to GA. And so that because that interface is stable, the out-of-tree providers will go to GA. But there is lots of ongoing work to bring other parts of Kubernetes to work with CSI, like inline volumes, and how do we migrate the in-tree persistent volume drivers to out-of-tree persistent volume drivers. So when it comes time to message what's happening here, it's really just that the out-of-tree CSI drivers are going GA, but there's still a lot of ongoing work for CSI. And then the other kind of tricky one was Windows containers going GA or support for Windows containers going GA. That really bumps into a lot of assumptions that are being made about conformance tests right now. There are a lot of differences between Windows and a Linux-ish operating system, including things like the way file permissions work, the way environment variables work with mixed case. And so we're kind of hashing out what we're going to do about that. Not entirely sure that we have an answer today, but I would expect there to be some ongoing discussion about that in the conformance working group meeting happening on Wednesday and in further SIG architecture meetings. That's it for me.
Okay. Should we, so for this Windows container, that particular stuff, do we block on conformance? No, right? Okay. All right.
We may, but I would rather that blocking decision come from SIG architecture. I believe they should have the authority to say what the gates are for a feature to go from beta to GA. I think that one of the compromises that was being tossed around was the idea that the Windows container feature itself, like a cluster that had mixed operating systems, might not be fully conformant, but if you disabled the Windows containers, maybe that would be a little bit better. So, all right, that's it for me now, for real.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Aaron, for all the updates. And yeah, for the CSI one, we'll make sure we message it correctly when it comes, when it's time for release notes and the blog post. Then moving on to CI Signal. Josh, do you want to take it off?
Yeah, so I'm not entirely up to date because I was in an airplane yesterday and delivering a training this morning, but I'll get caught up recently. More or less, this has been consistent with how things have been for 113 so far, which is that we don't have a lot of new test failures, but we continue to have test failures that don't go away.
Mm-hmm.
Just recently, I'm trying to remember who it was because I don't have it in front of me. But just recently, one contributor actually split up the
Justin Santa
two.
Barbara.
Thank you, Justin. Yes, Justin, you did a great job of splitting up the long-running upgrade jobs so that they don't time out all the time anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And this actually shows one thing critical, which is why these things that have been test failures for more than 2 weeks or more than 3 weeks and not gone away are such a problem, because the moment that those tests stopped timing out, we then saw a new failure that may be an actual code failure. So one of my priorities this week is going to be to get SIG app to please close the daemon set thing and stop having, stop that it's time to stop discussing what they want to do and actually implement something. Because my concern is the upgrade tests that are having daemon set failures may suddenly start showing other failures when those daemon set failures go away. Beyond that, I haven't seen a lot of new high priority issues. Something actually, we just got a new kubeadmin test failure that does look like a code failure, but SIG cluster lifecycle is already on it, so that should get resolved soon.
Yeah. The only other thing that still hangs on is that horizontal autoscaling issue. I know it got attention just late last week or this morning.
Yeah, no, I don't want to get out. That's really a flake because it's not consistently failing on any job, but it is consistently flaking on many jobs.
Yep.
And just signs that it's a bad test from a reliability perspective. So I'll see if we can get that fixed. I'm not regarding that as critical simply because it's been flaking before we even started the 113 cycle, but it would be really nice to get it less flaky.
Yeah, you're right. It flakes like almost 80% of the time, which kind of makes me think, oh, it's a failure. But then there were a few green runs in between.
I think the test is just written in a way that it is timing dependent. You follow me? That it can fail because of timing and not because the test actually failed. Right. But I don't understand the horizontal autoscaler well enough to fix it myself. I kind of get the sense that SIG autoscaling is not very well staffed right now because they just have not been very responsive through this whole cycle. But I'll attend their next SIG meeting to see what I can do about follow-up.
Cool. Yeah.
Or one of the shadows will. We'll see.
Thanks. Yeah, and then on the brighter side, core DNS merged, and all the scalability tests are everything we're holding up.
Yeah. It does bring up one thing that I should discuss with SIG scalability for the next release cycle, which is it would be lovely to have some scalability tests that also report times as well as success failure, just because core DNS could have slowed down everything by, say, 6%, which would not be considered a failure, but it's something we ought to know.
Yeah. When I spoke to them about this in their scalability sync, where Francois and all of them showed up, they do have this metric logged, and they are, for whatever it's worth, monitoring it on their end. But right now it doesn't gate or make the test pass or fail based on the metric. But if you were going to follow up on that, it's awesome, because I wanted to make sure that those are within the limits as well, or are not extremely all over the place. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, they have a limit set, right? And that is our pass-fail criteria, and I'm not going to second-guess them about changing it. But, even if we don't do that, if we say, hey, we consider core DNS passing, but it will, slow down response times by 4% for some users, that's the sort of thing we want to have in the release notes.
Yep. Aaron pointed to the perf dashboard in the chat.
Yeah, okay.
He was great. Yeah. Okay, I'll follow up on that. Yeah, as well.
Oh, right. Yeah, so we do have, I knew we had numbers somewhere.
Yes.
So, right. Actually, the problem is that we have too many numbers.
This is the one that, yeah, makes sense.
That's why ultimately I would make it their responsibility to
Yeah.
talk about the variability
Yeah.
in SLIs and SLOs. I think they're still in the midst of like hashing out specifically what those SLIs are anyway.
Yeah.
So
Let me make
I had some stuff to discuss on CI signal if
yes.
you're done, Josh.
Yeah, I think we're done with both Josh and my updates. So Aaron, take it away while I take the notes.
Okay, so I linked a thing in the doc. I will share the screen just so we're all looking at the same thing. It is this pull request where I add release blocking job criteria. It's based off this issue, which I can't see because of Zoom. Maybe is that the keyboard shortcut that does it? Whatever. Yes, that is. This was opened a year ago. Jason and I put together a Google Doc. I then put in sort of what the TLDR is for that anyway. And now I have gone through and added that to our release blocking jobs markdown doc. So if we view it, it looks like this. I'm trying to spell out the following criteria. The ideal release blocking job provisions cluster via open source software instead of a hosted service. This would disqualify things like GKE, EKS, and AKS from being on the release blocking dashboard. It runs in 120 minutes or less, and it runs at least every 3 hours. The motivation for these thresholds are both, that's what realistically doesn't disqualify the majority of our jobs right now. And it means that if we want to, the next thing is down here is it's capable of passing 3 times in a row against the same commit. That gives us some level of confidence that the job is actually stable and that we're not just seeing flakes. This is especially important as we get to the end of the release cycle and we're waiting for those 1 or 2 really tricky bug fixes to land. If we're waiting on a job that takes at most 2 hours to finish and it's scheduled every 3 hours, that means we could be waiting up to 9 hours. If we got aggressive with it, it could be mean we're waiting up to 6 hours to get our sort of go, no go signal. And that means we have anywhere from 2 to 4 decision points a day. I'd love to drop these numbers back. So I talk about we intend to drive these to stricter thresholds over time. But again, these are numbers that I found based on surveying the jobs today. There are a couple things here that are aspirational, like it's owned by a SIG that is responsible for addressing the failures, and it fails for no more than 10 runs in a row, and it has a documented reason for its inclusion in the release blocking suite. So I call out the fact that all of these things are aspirational by putting in to-dos, asking questions like, should we make exceptions for conformance jobs that right now are not scheduled very frequently, and you could argue that perhaps an external hosted service would like to prove that their conformance test is compliant. So that's a possibility. I really think some of these metrics should be percentiles, not maxes or medians. Mm-hmm. And so making SIGs responsible for addressing these criteria, I would like to represent that both by having contact info as part of the job description, as well as having an alert address configured in the test grid's ability to
Oh my
alert.
God, yes.
Okay.
The amount of time that I spend trying to figure out who owns the overall job.
Right. And then a documented reason for including in the suite. I kind of feel like that could possibly be represented in the description, but honestly, I'd love to be able to link to pull requests where we've had discussion about this, where we've made our decision to include it or not include it because of A, B, or C. Because none of these have that right now. So we'd sort of have to say, well, this is all kind of grandfathered in, and we're going to go through and kind of re-examine whether or not this is necessary. I also introduced the idea of moving a couple jobs off to what I'm calling a release informing dashboard, where these jobs still have the capacity to block the release, but because they require so much more human interpretation, we're going to move them off to their own dashboard. And whether or not we ultimately decide to pay attention to them is kind of a reading the tea leaves, last minute decision. this is basically me trying to represent the state of reality, because the scale jobs and the serial jobs both take a really, really long time. The serial jobs are really, really flaky. Scale jobs are often read when people say, don't worry about it. That requires a lot of human interpretation. So I'd like to have those in their own dashboard, and suggest merging this and then moving to the creation of that dashboard and moving things over to it. Finally, I had a point about whether or not we wanted to do this for whether the new work about splitting upgrade jobs into parallel and serial means we want to maybe consider that as well. I'd like to bike shed on that down the line. If you notice right now, all of the previous releases have two sets of dashboards. They have a blocking dashboard and they have an all dashboard. And the all dashboard looks to me like it contains all of the upgrade tests and all of the SKU tests. And generally those dashboards tend to stay red all the time because nobody troubleshoots upgrade tests for older releases. What we have for master is a whole bunch more people here. Look at all of us. And so as a result, we have more tests and a couple more dashboards. It's unclear to me whether the upgrade optional, kubectl SKU, and MISC dashboards all actually are equivalent to an all dashboard, but I know for purposes of troubleshooting right now, it makes sense to kind of carve those up into their own things. Since, as we've noticed, like Josh is paying extra attention to the upgrade tests right now, and Justin is actually fixing the upgrade tests. So maybe we can talk about reorganizing those down the line, but
yeah,
that is my proposal.
I'll say from a perspective of CI signal that we tend to just really never look at some of those optional tests, etc., because most of the test jobs on there are flaky enough as to provide us with no useful information.
Yes.
To be really blunt. And I would argue that there are tests on there that we simply shouldn't be running.
Yes. So, like, I have sort of held off on actually turning this into a documented format because really what I want are the metrics that inform all of those criteria. And I'd like all of those to be done via a query that runs against our current table. But I kind of don't want to block us any longer. I think if we can collectively agree to start with this, and I can show, you can kind of see some of the numbers, percentage of failures regardless of commit, are things you can actually get by reading the summary string of all the jobs in test grid. So I see a strong +1 from the CI signal.
Yeah. Yeah, this is like a huge +1 from me as well. If not anything, this is going to at least help us ensure that the release blocking dashboard is robust enough. Then if something fails in there, we are definitely a no-go. And then the master blocking, and then the informative one, we can interpret and then, deal with it on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
And upgrade, I completely agree. It's from even when I was a CI signal lead, I think I only focused on the master upgrade. I didn't even look at the upgrade optional and the others, mainly because the signal was super noisy, and I don't think we ever based a release on that, at least in the near past.
Okay, so for follow-up, I'm going to have some internal conversations to make sure the idea of kicking all the GKE jobs off of master blocking is acceptable. I've heard that it's totally acceptable from those in the trenches. I want to make sure I communicate that up the stack. And I feel like we should also make it clear to scalability that just because we're moving them off of a dashboard that has the word blocking to one that has the word informing does not mean we are in any way removing their ability to block the release.
Yes. Yeah. I think for whatever it's worth, for 113, we'll anyway end up looking at the informing dashboard just because we don't want to lose the signal.
Right.
But it's, eventually it's a bigger conversation as to how much attention we want to draw towards that. Yep. And when do we say, okay, these tests have been failing for, say, X days or X runs, so, no response from the owner's hands.
Okay. And Josh, I will make sure you are CC'd on all appropriate PRs, and we'll catch up with you as I have time to make sure the CI signal stuff is kept up to date. Okay, thank you for letting me move on that.
Thank you so much for driving that.
Yep. We can talk about doing this down the line for merge blocking, but I figured release blocking is a much clearer point of ownership for SIG release, so I'm going to start us here. I will hand back to Aish
Cool. Thanks a lot, Aaron. So yeah, in general, I think I'm feeling good about CI Signal at this point. Josh, you can agree or disagree, but looks like we are getting good attention from owners for the issues that we file. I know the floodgates are going to open later this week and next week once coding kind of ramps up. But if we get the daemon set and maybe the horizontal auto-scaling issues kind of wrangled ahead of that, I think we might go into active coding in a much better state. But yeah, let's move on then to bug triage. Nico, first of all, before Nico starts his update, a huge thanks to Nico for automating the bug triage dashboard. I know he's been working on this for the past few weeks, trying to pull all the issues down, the corresponding labels and status, and also working through feature requests for making this happen for CI Signal as well. Thanks a lot, Nico. And yeah, over to you.
Hello. Not much to report in terms of bug triage. I went through all the issues and the PRs, updated the notes, made sure people are working on them. The majority are on track. Mm-hmm. And there are a few that need to be repinged this week. The questions about the spreadsheets, having priority on issues.
On the issues, yeah. I was looking at the spreadsheet itself. I noticed that some of the issues, they don't have priorities filled out. So yeah, my question there was, could we ping the owners to make sure they fill up the priorities for that? And also make sure that the PRs that are linked to these issues have the same labels. So that way we know that we can have a one-on-one mapping between the two.
Yeah, I can do that. It's more useful down the line after code freeze and so on when the release is closer.
Yeah.
And the other one, yeah, I added, I altered the regex to include the kind and priority on the status labels column.
Yeah, that'll be super useful for us to eventually, if we want to make sure that those corresponding PRs are do meet the label criteria for like check-in for merge. Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I think the methods I'm doing the automation, it's hitting some limits. Both the Google Sheet functions and the Google Apps script are both rate limiting, sort of, though they're much better. Might be considering an external solution that's sort of complete, but I'll see. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Next up, is Cool on the line? Okay, test infra. I just had a couple of questions regarding formalizing the labels for different stages of the release itself. Cole, did you have any other updates before we talk about these?
Well, besides GitHub having all of its problems today, but I don't think we have much to comment on yet, besides what Aaron has already said. As far as the label requirements go, we already have the functionality for saying that we are going to require some type of label, like requiring the kind label or the priority label. Mm-hmm. We haven't used it for priority yet, so all I need to do is like just create a new needs priority label. But requiring priority across the board for PRs shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah. I wanted to just get others' feedback, opinions about formalizing this for the code/period itself. If we're going to make sure that the PRs that go in have importance soon as priority, then is there a reason that we don't want to put this in code? If anybody has any historical context, that'll be good to know.
Well, for slush, we just require a priority label, correct?
Yeah, I thought it was in the...
So according to the document here, it says that some sort of priority is required for slush, and then critical urgent priority is required for code freeze.
Yes. Yeah, I think we should at least start with some kind of priority, but ideally it's... I would assume it would be important soon and critical urgent, but then at least we can start with asking for some kind of priority in the PR.
Sure. It's easy to switch it to just a subset if we want to do that too.
Yeah. So any opinions from anyone on this? If not, we can start with priority label. Cool. The other one was regarding the retro follow-up on adding a priority again to PRs post during the code talk, or so that we can get critical PRs in first during the code talk period when we have a backlog. I was looking at the recording, and looks like we finally landed on not doing this versus making the test less flaky and ensuring that and we go by on a case-by-case basis, where if there's a critical PR and it's backed up, then we would directly look into cherry-picking it into the release rather than waiting for it to land on master. Now that we had some more time to think about it, I just wanted to know if there was any other options, if Cole or others have had chance to think about adding a priority, or if we want to stick with that plan for 113.
So we've avoided having priority and tied for some design reasons. That being said, it seems like it's been a feature that'd be pretty useful. It's not on my radar for completing next quarter, but I could raise that and potentially do that if that's considered something that is really needed.
My only fear was, again, we just have like 2 days of code for this release. So, and considering that we just have a week to get things out after that. So if there's a possibility, and if it's not too much of, technical work or a big amount of work there, I thought it'd be good to have that in. Again, I'm open to any discussions for or against that.
Yeah, I don't think it would be terribly difficult to implement. It's just the reason that we avoided is because with the submit queue, we had lots of prioritization logic. And there's a number of downsides for that. The main one being that it hurts like contributor user experience when they see their PR like leave the front of the merge queue. And it also actually has like some bad effects on how we do testing, because if the queue is shifting around, we constantly are triggering new tests, and it can hurt merge velocity. It also adds some complexity, of course. But if we just have something that's as simple as like, if you have this label, you go to the front of the queue.
Yeah,
that could be a reasonable compromise.
Okay. Let's discuss this offline. I just wanted to bring this up here so that we are aware that we are having the conversation, but I can discuss offline with you and maybe Aaron if you're free, but just to see what the pros and cons of doing this, and then we can probably make a decision and bring it back.
Sure.
Because I kind of think this might be useful. I don't know if there are cases where it's the master and the branch deviates quite considerably after thought that it might not be safe to merge it, cherry pick things directly into the release before putting it in master. I don't know if we'll hit cases like that where our backup option might not be that helpful.
The other option is also delaying or keeping delaying thaw until everything's ready.
Yes, that's pretty much what we did for 112 as well. But again, how much longer we're going to do that while blocking? I mean, while kind of closing out the master is another question. Yeah. Cool. Let's take this offline and maybe come back to come back with a decision next week. Cool. So next up to docs. I know Tim, he updated the status. He's not able to join us today. So he has his updates there. He was going to update the issue. He has a pull request to update the handbook to say that all docs PR should now go to the K website, the new branch in the K website. And he was also going to follow up on running the API and CLI generation tool during our beta cuts. Offline, another discussion that we had offline that I wanted to update to the forum here was docs requirement for out-of-tree enhancements. We know AWS has about 3 enhancements that are coming in 113 for which they wanted some kind of inclusion in docs. So we had a discussion with Mike and Stephen and Tim offline. And there are 3 types of docs that we could probably put in for enhancement. And for out of tree, we decided that we would do the blog post. We'll include it as needed in the K8s blog post. and Mike could manually add, call attention to these work in the release notes, but we would not be adding it to the official K8's docs as a PR to the K website itself. So we'll do 1 and 2, but not 3, the one that's listed in the notes there. So just wanted to let the group know of that. And if anybody has any opinions on that, please let me know. Moving on, release notes. Yeah, understandably, there's nothing started there. This is another question I had. Mike, are you there on the call?
Yep. How's it
Yeah.
going?
Do you have any updates before I have a question around that?
No, not really. Other than it's you know, I feel strange for there to be 0 release notes so far, but you know, it's still pretty early, I guess.
Yeah. So this goes back to, we have a release notes draft on the calendar, like on week 3 of the release cycle, but we don't see anything landing before. So my question was, should we be more rigorous in asking folks to open like draft release themes that early in the cycle, or does it make sense to move this out? Historically, when have we seen folks like getting more busy with release notes? This again is a question of, this is something that we can put in the doc that I would be starting, like when do realistically release notes gather momentum?
Yeah, so I've only been around for the last 2 releases, and in my experience, release notes start pretty quickly, and they definitely speed up towards the end of the release. But you know, in my opinion, it's pretty strange for there to be no commits with any release notes this late in the process.
Okay.
So I would have said that, you know, if you would have asked me 3 weeks ago, I would have told you that 3 weeks in is a good first time. You know, I'm just not sure if there's any like dynamics with this release going on, but I was thinking of maybe coordinating with the, what do you call it? The features, the enhancements lead, and seeing if maybe there are things that we can start prodding people for that are like known to be going in this release or something.
Okay, they've been pinging the enhancement issues for more PR list and docs. Maybe we can go back and ping them about the release notes as well, if you want to go ahead and do that for the enhancements, or I can help wrangle some notes as well. But I know this is pretty early, but just wanted to make sure our expectations are in line with what the calendar says.
Yeah, I'll dig around.
Okay.
This does feel rather early to me to start pinging a bunch of people. Like if we're still doing the scatter gather approach, then that's totally fine. I guess the other thing I could offer was the way I had clustered things up. Like it would take me time, and I'm not offering to do this right now, but like in theory, you could write a blog post right now that based on all of the enhancements, like what's going to happen? What are we planning for? And it's like Windows containers go GA, kubeadm goes GA, out of tree CSI plugins go GA. We're improving some kubectl things. There's a whole bunch of storage stuff. Ta-da, that's the release. And if you make that kind of statement, you might get a whole bunch of people coming out of the woodwork saying, whoa, 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 wait about, what about this other thing that I totally want to land by now? It's a thought.
Yeah.
Also, it might help our marketing and messaging.
So is that something we would put as part of the release notes draft? We would, right? Like Mike, is it?
See, I don't know if that's how release notes work anymore. It used to be earlier when I was more involved in the release notes process that there were humans who did manual editing and tried to consolidate things into themes across the entire release. But when I say scatter gather, what I'm talking about is asking every single SIG to talk about their themes. And so the release notes are like a bunch of SIGs talking about a bunch of things. Yeah.
I know we do that towards the end, at least in the last 2 releases, we've done it pretty much at the towards the tail end. Yes, this is again one of those things of how have we done this? What is the right, what's the right balance to like strike and win? Okay, this is one more item for us to follow on. I'll follow up with you, Mike, and we'll hopefully have a better answer. Cool. And that, oh yeah, the last one that was on the list was patch release for 1.8. I don't know if Tim is on the call. I see Tim's. I don't know if he's in here for this issue, but on the SIG release channel, we had an issue open up where the packaging was broken for 1.8, and I forget the name of the person who was requesting a patch release for this. Given that Andre was requesting a patch release for 1.8, given that we are almost, it's out of our 3 release, it's out of our 3 release cycle. I just wanted to know, do we end up pinging the old patch manager? We need some ownership / action item to move this forward. So how have we done this in the past? Do we just go ahead and ping this old patch manager for this? No idea. Yes, looks like this from the issue, this does seem critical to have a fix for.
I guess I would ping the old patch manager. They might get cranky that like, this is beyond our release window. We don't do this anymore, which is not the friendliest answer to our end user. And at that point, I'm not sure what to say. Maybe I would bring it back to Caleb, if he's the person sort of driving release packaging efforts in general for this SIG. Another question you could also potentially reach out to the product security team, who I think broke our policy one time to fix a critical CVE. And there was, I believe, a release cut beyond our supported window, although it may have been earlier in the release cycle than we are now.
Okay, and what group is it? This is the
product security team.
Okay.
So this is folks like Jordan Liggett and Jess Frizzell and stuff like that. Or I think she's stepping down, but folks like that.
Okay.
You look for security at kubernetes.io, I think.
Okay.
You'll find them.
Wait. I don't understand why how this is related to 1.8.
Should we cut a release of 1.8 when it is outside of our support window?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My answer is no. Pretty much.
Yeah.
So there's that. But we have made an exception to this in the past where there was a critical security vulnerability and the product security team managed to wrangle whoever to cut a release for something that was outside of our support window. So it's possible. And this apparently sounds like the whole one, like the last release of 1.8 was broken, or is it all releases of 1.8 are broken? I don't know. Either way, it's like, it's not a great friendly user experience. I don't think this should be something the release 113 lead should be chasing down for what it's worth. I would hand this off to the SIG chairs. So Jace or Caleb, who I think are both down there in person. But like, I hate giving the unfriendly answer, but the official answer would be, no, we don't cut any more releases.
Yeah, I think he was looking for somebody to get some answers about if we can move this forward. So I thought this would be some place where I can get some insight, and I did. So I will bring Caleb and see where this can go. So that's all we have for this week, unless anybody have any comments, feedback. Cool. If not, we can have 15 minutes of our life back. That's awesome. Cool.
Thanks all. Before I drop while you're here, Josh, if you can just give either an explicit LGTM or review that PR that I was showing, blocking criteria, that would make me feel a lot better that this release team has approved that, rather than saying, we talked about it, it's cool, don't worry about it.
No, I want to go over it in detail, which is why I haven't put anything yet.
Cool, thank you. All right.
Okay, bye.
Have a magnificent Monday.
Yeah, bye-bye. Yeah.